Title: Sovereign's Ascension. Chapter 1. Echoes of the Skyborn. The Skyborn Citadel had not welcomed a true heir in an age beyond reckoning. Suspended in the storm-racked sky by ancient magics and divine edicts, its spires clawed toward the heavens like forgotten prayers. Within its grand throne room, a silence reigned that could stifle even the boldest of hearts. Qin Yun stood at its center, his silhouette outlined in shifting arcs of celestial lightning. He had claimed 6 of the 9 shards, each one embedded in his soul like a brand from the heavens. They pulsed now with an uneasy rhythm, resonating with the citadel itself. It recognized him, yet something in its bones stirred with doubt. This place, born of gods and ruin, remembered too much. Yanrui stepped beside him, her breath shallow, her gaze cautious. The air here is thick with judgment. Qin Yun nodded slowly. He could feel it. Every heartbeat echoed through the hall as though the walls themselves listened, waiting. Because this place holds memories. It knows what came before. A low tremor shivered through the floor as he approached the throne, an ancient seat wrought of obsidian, gold, and starfire. The moment his fingers grazed its armrest, visions stormed through him. The first sovereign, the rebellion of the boundless sky, the cataclysm. His knees buckled. He saw wars fought on continents in the clouds, kings turned mad by power, and a sovereign who burned the stars to save a single child. He saw himself, born again and again in myriad forms, always caught in the same struggle. These memories, they're not just of the citadel, he gasped. They're mine. Yanrui helped him steady. Your past lives? He nodded, heart pounding. Or fragments of them. Before they could process more, the citadel shifted. Spires rotated. The skies darkened further. A voice older than time echoed. He who seeks to ascend must pass the trial of remembrance. With a rumble, the throne room split open into 9 corridors, each glowing with a distinct hue. The path of remembrance had begun. Qin Yun turned to Yanrui. You cannot follow. She gripped his arm tightly. Then return, or I will tear the citadel apart to bring you back. He managed a wan smile before stepping into the first corridor. The world twisted. He found himself on a battlefield soaked in blood. He wore armor not of his era, white and gold, bearing the sigil of the high stars. Around him, legions clashed. He remembered this place, a memory not his own, yet rooted in his marrow. A woman cried out. He turned, Yanrui, but not the one he knew. Her features were the same, but her eyes held centuries of command. Qin Yun, she called, hold the line. He raised his blade, different, heavier, but familiar. Enemies surged, and he met them with terrifying grace. The memory demanded more than observation. It made him livid. For what felt like days, he fought, relived tragedy, bore the death of comrades, until he reached the moment where that version of himself faltered, chose vengeance over duty. But Qin Yun remembered who he was now. He chose differently. The memory shattered. In the second corridor he stood not as a warrior, but a sage. 1,000 disciples knelt before him in a jade courtyard beneath twin moons. He was revered, powerful, and feared. A child approached, tear-streaked. Master, the council demands your resignation. They say you dabble in forbidden arts. The sage version of him laughed coldly. They fear truth. In the original memory, he had burned the council to ashes. Now he knelt before them, spoke with humility, offered his findings freely. The outcome was the same, banishment. But the flame of hate did not ignite. The corridor faded. 7 more corridors followed, each more harrowing than the last. He lived through betrayals, loves lost, empires risen and crumbled. Each time he altered the course with the wisdom of the present. He shed vengeance. He chose compassion without weakness. He endured failure without despair. Finally, the 9th corridor opened. A mirror. He stood alone, facing himself. No past life. No disguise. Just him. "What are you afraid of?" the mirror version asked. "Losing myself," Qin Yun said simply. The reflection nodded. "Then remember this. Power is not what you wield. It's what you protect." The mirror shattered. He collapsed back into the throne room. The corridors were gone. The spires calmed. And before him, the throne glowed. He approached again. This time, the throne accepted him fully. Shards pulsed in unison. The citadel sang a silent song of recognition. Yan Rui burst through the sealed door, eyes wild. "You're changed," he whispered. Outside, storms began to calm. The sky brightened, but from far below, beyond mortal sight, shadows coiled. A god, long thought dead, stirred. And so, the final war began. Chapter 2. The Storm-Sundered Veil. The sky above the Veil of Storms churned with eternal thunderclouds, a celestial tempest born of ancient wrath. Lightning forked from the heavens like the lashes of gods, striking shattered peaks and burning runes into the crumbling stone. Here, wind spoke in tongues and time spiraled backward on itself. Qin Yun and Yan Rui stood at the edge of the cliff, peering into the swirling mists that veiled the descent into the storm-sundered veil. Yan Rui shivered despite the heat of the shard in her satchel. "The last shard is down there?" she asked, voice strained. Qin Yun nodded, his expression unreadable. The heart of the sovereign. The first to be forged, the last to be reclaimed. They descended slowly, braving the crackling energies that surged through the air. With each step, the shard within Qin Yun pulsed faster, resonating with the land's fury. The closer they came, the heavier his limbs felt, as though gravity itself sought to stop him. Below, the veil opened into a basin of broken relics and fractured temples. In the center, encased in a monolith of crystal lightning, floated the final shard. But they were not alone. A figure emerged from the ruin, a woman clad in tattered white, eyes glowing with silver light. Her presence warped the very fabric of reality, and her voice was both thunder and whisper. "Qin Yun," she intoned, "bearer of 7, you are not welcome here." Yan Rui raised her blade. "Who are you?" "I am the echo of the first sovereign," she replied, "bound here by oath, by memory, by vengeance. He broke the world to forge the shards, and I remain to ensure they are never whole again." Qin Yun stepped forward. "I won't repeat his mistakes." "No," she said, "but you will face them." The duel began not with a clash of steel, but of storms. The echo moved with preternatural speed, conjuring illusions born from Qin Yun's doubts. Each blow forced him to question his purpose, his past, his very soul. Yan Rui fought by his side, her strikes grounded in unyielding resolve. Together they withstood the storm, not by overpowering it, but by enduring. As the final blow struck the crystal monolith, the shard surged forward, embedding itself into Qin Yun's chest. A blinding light erupted, then silence. When the light faded, the veil was calm for the first time in millennia. The echo, her purpose fulfilled, faded like mist. Qin Yun looked skyward. He felt it, every shard, every memory, every sin and triumph. He was no longer just a vessel. He was the sovereign reborn. Yan Rui took his hand. "Then let's finish this." In the east, the stars shifted, and something vast began to descend. Chapter 3. The Descent of the Empyrean Host. The wind carried no scent. The birds did not sing. The sky, once inked with storm and flame, now stood eerily clear, a stillness so deep it heralded calamity. Qin Yun felt it in his bones, a tremor that sang to the deepest recesses of his being. The shards had called, and the heavens had answered. From the eastern sky the Empyrean host descended, columns of celestial fire, each a pillar of divinity. At their head rode a figure wreathed in dawnlight, cloaked in starlight armor that shimmered like the void. "The judgment arrives," Yan Rui whispered. Qin Yun's breath was steady, though his pulse roared. "Let them come." They stood atop the last sacred peak, where the ley lines of the ninefold realms converged. Beneath them, a city ancient beyond reckoning, Sanctum Astra, stirred awake. Its spires had once sung with the sovereign's breath. Now they hummed again. The host did not speak. They formed a ring around the mountain, their weapons leveled, not in challenge but in ceremony. The herald stepped forth. A woman of unaging grace, her eyes gleamed with cosmic knowledge. "Qin Yun, bearer of the sovereign flame, the circle has convened. Do you seek ascension or dominance?" He did not answer at once. The shards within him flared, each a voice, each a choice. "I seek restoration," he finally said, "a world no longer torn by gods and tyrants." Silence. Then a ripple through the host, as though even divinity paused to breathe. "Then you must endure the crucible." Before he could speak again, the peak beneath him cracked. Qin Yun fell, not into darkness, but into blinding light. The crucible of stars was not a place, but a proving. Time fractured, and he stood before every sovereign that came before him. Each bore the mark of rule, each bore the wounds of failure. One by one, they tested him. The first sovereign struck with pure will, shaping the realm with thought alone. The second spoke in paradoxes, unraveling reason. The third wept, her sorrow drowning worlds. The ninth, last before Qin Yun, merely waited, offering nothing but silence. Yet Qin Yun endured. He gave no quarter. He held to his truth. He faced their echoes and their pain. And when it ended, he stood at the center of the cosmos, the shards now whole. "You are ready," came the voice of the stars. He awoke atop the mountain. Yan Rui stood beside him, tears in her eyes. The host had vanished. Only the herald remained. She bowed. "You are sovereign. May your reign mend what was broken." Qin Yun closed his eyes, the weight of countless lives now his to carry. So began the age of restoration. Chapter 4. The silent accord days passed in ethereal quiet. The mountain winds no longer howled with fury, and the skies had returned to hues of distant dawn. Yet beneath that calm, tensions ran taut, a string drawn tight before the final note. Word of the Empyrean host's judgment had spread like wildfire through the ninefold realms, carried on whispers and shadows. In Sanctum Astra, the ancient city of divine accord, emissaries began to arrive. The first to kneel at the rebuilt dais was Grandmaster Tyrant, Lord of the Hollow Monks. His third eye blazed with inner fire. "Sovereign Qin Yun," he intoned, "we acknowledge the cycle reborn." Others followed: Wormcaller Shu of the deep sky, Ice Saint Mei Lin of the fractured north, and Veil Master Kiru, whose face none had seen in centuries. Each bore gifts, relics, vows, ancient scrolls sealed in blood. Yan Rui watched them all from Qin Yun's side. "They come not for loyalty," she murmured, "but for balance, or fear." Qin Yun nodded. "They should fear, but not me. What comes next?" That night, beneath the moon's pale gaze, he summoned the Council of Nine, leaders of all mortal and immortal clans. They gathered in the sky-glass hall where truth could not be hidden, and lies shattered upon entry. Qin Yun stood without regalia, his power muted, his voice firm. "The sovereigns broke this world. The gods divided it. I will not rule by flame and sword. I offer accord, not dominion." Murmurs rippled. Kiru leaned forward, voice soft as mist. "And if we decline?" "I will not force unity," Qin Yun said, "but I will protect it." The vote was cast, not by strength but by will, and the accord was signed. Yet even as ink dried, a new ripple disturbed the ley lines. Deep within the ruins of Hollow Gen, a gate trembled. Something old stirred, a presence untouched by the sovereign cycle. In the days that followed, the skies dimmed by degrees. Stars blinked out. Birds flew in wrong directions. The sun hung longer at twilight. Yan Rui stood atop the sky-glass spire. "You feel it, don't you?" Qin Yun joined her, eyes on the horizon. "Yes. The accord won us time. Nothing more." She turned to him. "Then we prepare." "No," he said. "We remember. The world was once broken by pride. This time we begin with humility." Below, Sanctum Astra lit its beacon towers. Messengers rode into the night. The Age of Restoration had its first test. And somewhere, far beneath hollow earth and dead stars, an ancient eye opened. Chapter 5. Echoes Beneath Hollow. Gen the summons came in silence. Beneath a waning moon, Qin Yun received a sealed scroll marked with the crest of the Lost Oracle Guild. The script within shimmered with ancient light, coordinates etched in forgotten runes, a message layered in 5 tongues. It spoke of Hollow Gen and the thing beneath it. "Old places wake," Qin Yun said, voice low, "but not of their own will." Yan Rui frowned. The Oracle Guild vanished during the last era. If they send word now, something watches. Qin Yun called his companions. Yan Rui, Warden Thalos, and the mute diviner child, Z. They traveled not by ley line, but on foot, through valleys where time flowed backward and streams whispered names. Hollow Gen lay broken. The once grand citadel had collapsed inwards, swallowed by the very earth it defied. Yet beneath rubble and ash, a rhythm pulsed, a heartbeat not human. They entered the chasm with blades drawn. Z held up a shard of moonstone. It pulsed with each step, echoing deeper into the dark. They found it. A gate. Monolithic, metallic, breathing. "Not built," said Thalos. "Born." The surface shifted, revealing eyes. Dozens, hundreds, blinking in patterns that twisted the mind. A voice, not heard but felt, reached into them. "You are not the first." Qin Yun stepped forward. "Then who came before?" The gate pulsed. "The ones who chained me, the sovereigns." Suddenly the cavern shook. Sigils burst from the walls, forming a dome of golden runes. A trap, not for intruders but to keep the thing inside. The seal had weakened. Above, in Sanctum Astra, alarms tolled. The Council of Nine reconvened in panic. Dreams shattered across the realm. Children cried with no reason. Yan Rui turned to Qin Yun. "Do we seal it again?" "No," he said. "We speak to it." He placed his hand on the living gate. Memories flooded him. Lives before his own. A sovereign who questioned divinity. A lover lost in the fracture. A child born in war. The gate responded. "Then you are the heir of broken truths. Welcome." Chains shattered, and the gate opened. What emerged was not demon nor god, but a being of memory, cloaked in echoes. It stepped forward and knelt. To rebuild, one must remember. And the Age of Restoration shuddered anew. Chapter 6. The Labyrinth of Truths. The being called Echo, newly emerged from the gate beneath Hollow Gen, knelt before Qin Yun with reverence alien to the creature's ethereal form. Its body shimmered with fragments of time, faces, events, and worlds flashing briefly across its translucent surface like fleeting memories. "You remember," it said. "So few do." Qin Yun hesitated. "What are you?" "I am what was forgotten. I am the covenant broken when sovereigns reached too far." Yan Rui circled the being, wary. "A fragment of the lay mind?" Echo turned toward her. The lay mind was but a voice. I am the labyrinth behind it. With a gesture, the being opened a portal, not through space, but memory. The group stepped through, finding themselves in an impossible place, a floating archive suspended in starlight where each step echoed through centuries. Scrolls hovered mid-air. Tomes whispered their own names. "This is the memory labyrinth," said Echo. "Here, truth hides behind perception." They walked corridors shaped by recollection. Qin Yun saw his past lives etched in living murals. Yan Ri viewed her lineage's betrayal in reverse, each ancestor turning away from destiny. A test awaited at each passage's end. Warden Thalos confronted his twin, lost in battle centuries ago, forced to relive the moment he chose duty over kin. She was swallowed by a mirror showing her as a woman grown, with voice and purpose, a destiny yet to bloom. In the heart of the labyrinth, the sovereigns stood, or memories of them. 7 thrones, 6 filled with phantoms. The 7th, broken. Echo turned to Qin Yun. "The empty throne was yours." A weight fell upon him. "Why did I abandon it?" "Because you saw what sovereignty required, the erasure of self." He staggered. Yan Rui steadied him. "But now," Echo answered, "now you choose. Rebuild the throne or break them all." A choice. Qin Yun stepped forward. Before him, the shards of the empty throne hovered. He reached out, not to rebuild, but to understand. And as his hand touched the first shard, a cry rang out across realms. A herald had awoken. The Accord was under siege. Time shattered around them. They stood again in hollow Zhen, but it was burning, and above them wings of fire split the heavens. Chapter 7. Whispers of the Forgotten. The dawn came slowly, as though the world itself was reluctant to wake. Qin Yun stood at the edge of Sanctum Astra, looking out across the sprawling city below. The sun's rays seemed dull compared to the once brilliant light that had bathed the ninefold realms in the past. Yet, beneath the faint glow, something within him stirred, an instinct he had long suppressed, one that told him something monumental was about to unfold. In the days following the opening of the living gate, the world had grown heavier. The echoes from the past clung to the air like an unseen fog. People had whispered of the dark presence that now walked among them, the being who had been freed from its prison beneath hollow Zhen. It was not a god, nor a demon, but something in between, something born of memories, fragments of a forgotten age. Yan Rui appeared at his side, her steps light but her presence unmistakable. Her gaze followed his, and her voice, when it came, was soft yet steady. "Do you feel it, Qin Yun? The shift. The whole world trembles, even the stars." He nodded, though his thoughts were clouded. "The stars are merely the first to fall. This time, we may not be able to stop the descent." The mysterious entity from Hollow Zhen had taken residence in the heart of Sanctum Astra, its true form hidden beneath layers of shifting illusions. No one but Qin Yun and a handful of trusted allies had seen it, and yet its influence was undeniable. The whispers had spread far, from the most powerful sects to the smallest villages. Some called it the Harbinger. Others referred to it as the Last Witness. But Qin Yun, ever cautious, chose to believe only what his eyes had seen and his instincts told him. His mind drifted back to the cryptic words it had spoken. To rebuild, one must remember. The implication was heavy and its meaning elusive. What was the gate that had been opened, and what did it truly mean for the future of the ninefold realms? "We must speak to it again," Qin Yun said finally, turning toward Yan Rui with a resolve that burned in his eyes. "We need answers, and I do not intend to wait for the answers to come to us." Yan Rui raised an eyebrow, sensing the gravity in his tone. "And you think this Harbinger will give them to you? It's dangerous, Qin Yun. What if it's the key?" he interrupted, his voice firm but tinged with urgency. "What if everything hinges on what we find in the dark? I will not let the world fall apart because of old fears." Without another word, they set off, making their way toward the heart of the sanctum where the entity resided. As they passed through the grand halls of the city, The air grew thick with tension, and even the most stalwart souls seemed to shrink away. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, as if the very walls of the sanctum were closing in. At the gates to the inner sanctum, 2 of the council's highest officers, members of the Council of 9, stood guard. Their eyes betrayed concern, and one of them, Worm-Color Shu, stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together. "Sovereign Qin Yun," she began, her voice heavy with caution, "the being you've unleashed, it is not of this world. It speaks in riddles and shows no sign of obeying any of our laws. We have tried to communicate, but there is no response that can be understood." Qin Yun met her gaze with an intensity that could not be mistaken. "We will not remain silent while shadows whisper in our world's heart. Bring me to it. Now." The path to the heart of Sanctum Astra was lined with high statues of ancient gods, their faces worn by the passage of time, their expressions ever watchful. As they neared the central hall, the air grew even thicker, as though it were filled with the weight of thousands of souls, bound and waiting. When they finally arrived, the entity stood before them, its form a fluid amalgamation of shifting shapes, never the same for more than a breath. Yet there was a presence, a palpable pressure that emanated from it like a deep, resounding pulse. Qin Yun stepped forward. "Harbinger," he called, his voice steady though his heart raced. "We have opened the gate. Now it is time to speak." The entity's form shifted, and for the first time its voice came, not in whispers but in something far more profound, an echo that seemed to span the very fabric of reality itself. "You wish to know, mortal?" it asked, its voice not from one place but from all places at once. "You seek to break the chains of fate and reach beyond the veil. But understand this, the world does not bend to the will of one." Qin Yun clenched his fists, but his mind remained calm. "I do not seek to control the world. I seek only to preserve it." The being's form flickered, its eyes appearing as 2 great pools of light within the darkness. "The worlds have already been broken, Qin Yun. They are held together by fragile threads, and one such thread is about to snap." A cold shiver ran down his spine as the implications of the words settled in. This was not just about the power of gods or the struggles between mortals. It was something far older, more insidious. He needed to understand, and quickly. "We are running out of time," Yan Rui whispered beside him, her tone urgent. "Whatever this thing is, it's pushing us closer to a point of no return." The entity laughed, though the sound was not one of mirth. "Return? There is no return, child. There is only the truth that you seek, the truth that lies buried beneath the sands of time. Seek it, and you may find salvation. Or, perhaps, you will awaken something far worse." Qin Yun stepped forward, his expression unyielding. "I will face whatever comes, but I will not allow the 9-fold realms to fall into chaos again." The entity's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was a hint of pity in its gaze. "Then you must understand one thing, Sovereign. The price for peace is not what you think, and when you reach the end, it is not the power you wield that will matter. It is the sacrifice you make." A chill ran through him. It was not a warning. It was a truth, one he could feel in his bones. "Leave now," the entity intoned. "The journey ahead will demand more than you can imagine. But remember this, the choice will always be yours." And with that, the entity's form began to dissipate, as though it were made of smoke. The pressure in the air lifted, but the weight of its words remained, lingering in the room like a storm cloud. Qin Yun stood motionless for a long moment, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just heard. Yan Rui's hand on his shoulder broke his reverie. "We should go," she said quietly. "There's nothing more to be gained here." But even as he turned to leave, Qin Yun knew that the true journey had just begun. Chapter 8. The Shattered Veil. The events that followed the encounter with the entity left a deep imprint on Qin Yun's mind. The world had grown heavier, and the unseen threads of fate seemed to tighten around the ninefold realms. As the sovereign of the realm, he had already seen so much, yet he knew that the real test had only just begun. Days passed in relative silence, but that silence was deceptive. Every corner of Sanctum Astra buzzed with quiet urgency as preparations for the unknown took shape. The sky above remained clouded, the once clear heavens now a muted gray. Shadows stretched longer, and whispers grew louder with every passing day. It was then that a message arrived from the fractured north. Qin Yun stood upon the balcony, the scroll held loosely in his hand. Yan Rui, ever watchful, approached silently, sensing the gravity of the moment. "The fractured north," he murmured, eyes darkening. "The elders of the Ice Saint sect request an audience." "With you?" Yan Rui asked, her brow furrowing. "Given the way they reacted to the Harbinger's presence, I would have expected them to remain in hiding, not to seek out your guidance." "Perhaps they wish to ally with us," Qin Yun said, though doubt lingered in his words. "Or perhaps they come with a warning." The summons was clear. They would meet in the ancient temple of Azora Peak, a place steeped in both history and power. It was said to be built atop one of the world's most potent ley line intersections. Whoever held control of that temple could sway the balance of the world. Qin Yun, accompanied by Yan Rui, Thalos, and Z, made the journey north. The wind had grown colder the farther they traveled, and the further they ventured into the fractured north, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Azora Peak loomed before them, an imposing mountain that pierced the sky. The temple at its summit was a marvel, built from white stone that shimmered even under the dim light of the ever-setting sun. It was a structure designed not for grandeur, but for quiet reverence, with towering spires that stretched far into the heavens. The elders of the Ice Saint sect stood waiting at the temple gates. Their appearance was striking, each one dressed in robes woven from the essence of ice, their skin pale like the glaciers that stretched across the north. Yet, despite their serene appearance, there was something unsettling about their eyes, something hollow, as if the weight of years had left them devoid of warmth. At the front stood Mei Lin, the Ice Saint herself, a woman whose presence could freeze the very air around her. Her gaze was sharp, yet there was something vulnerable in her eyes, an ancient sadness that seemed to have taken root deep within her. "Sovereign Qin Yun," she greeted him, her voice cold but respectful. "We have awaited your arrival." "Why summon me?" Qin Yun asked, his voice steady but filled with the weight of expectation. Mei Lin did not hesitate. "Because the world has changed, and with it, our fate. The Harbinger you have freed, it is not an isolated force. There are others, older, more dangerous, who stir in the darkness. We have seen their rise." "And what do you propose?" Yan Rui interjected, her eyes narrowing. "The Ice Saint sect has long kept watch over the fractured north, but we cannot do it alone. The ley line disturbances are growing, and they are beginning to corrupt the land itself. If we do not act soon, the entire realm will be consumed by what stirs beneath." Qin Yun remained silent, letting her words settle in his mind. He knew the ley line disturbances were only the tip of the iceberg. The Harbinger's release had been the catalyst, but what would come next? What dangers had been set in motion? "We seek your help," Mei Lin continued, "but not just yours. We need a unified front, the combined strength of all the realms." Qin Yun's eyes narrowed. "Unification requires trust, and that is not easily given." "We do not have time to waste on politics," Mei Lin said firmly. "The world is crumbling, and if we do not act, it will be too late." Qin Yun turned to his companions, exchanging a glance with Yan Rui. The weight of the decision bore down on him. His mind raced as he considered the options. To unite the realms was no small feat. The sovereigns had once divided the world, and now they sought to impose their will upon it. Was there truly a way to restore balance? "I will help," he said finally, his voice resolute. But I need your people's aid in return. The balance we seek can only come through mutual effort." Mei Lin bowed her head, the faintest trace of relief crossing her face. "It will be done, Sovereign Qin Yun." The agreement was made. Together, they would journey to the heart of the disturbances, to the point where the ley lines converged, a place of unimaginable power, where the ancient forces lay dormant, waiting to be awoken. The days that followed were filled with preparations. The Ice Saint sect provided their most powerful warriors and mages, while Qin Yun called upon his own forces. The Skyglass Hall was once again transformed into a hub of activity, where plans were made and supplies gathered. Even the Council of Nine was drawn into the affair, each faction hesitant but willing to lend their support for the sake of survival. On the day of departure, the group gathered at the foot of Azora Peak. The air was thick with anticipation, and the first traces of twilight began to fade into the horizon. The journey ahead would not be easy. Whatever awaited them in the heart of the fractured north was something that even the ancient elders feared. "We are ready," Qin Yun said, his voice low and commanding. "The path ahead is uncertain, but we walk it together." And with that, they began their ascent, the weight of their mission heavy in the air. Chapter 9. The Heart of the Storm. The fractured north was colder than any place Qin Yun had ever known. It was not just the chill in the air, but the pervasive, biting cold that seemed to seep into one's very soul. The land itself was a graveyard of ancient, forgotten memories, shattered remnants of a world that had once been whole. The sky, perpetually covered by an oppressive veil of clouds, seemed to press down upon them, and the winds howled in mournful tones. The further they journeyed toward the heart of the ley line disturbances, the more the environment grew unnatural. The mountains themselves seemed to shift, as though they were alive, their stone faces contorted in silent agony. Qin Yun, Yan Rui, Thalos, and the Ice Saint sect's warriors marched in silence. Behind them, the people of the sect moved in disciplined formation, eyes alert, weapons at the ready. Mei Lin led the way, her face set in an expression of deep resolve, though there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. It was not just the unnatural cold that unnerved her. There was something deeper, something ancient, stirring beneath the earth. The ley line disturbances were not merely a natural occurrence. Something was waking, something malevolent. After days of trekking through the bitter cold and harsh terrain, they reached a vast plain surrounded by jagged peaks. At the center of the plain stood a massive, shimmering crystal formation that pulsated with a soft, eerie glow. The very air around it crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. "This is the heart of the storm," Mei Lin whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling winds. "Where the ley lines converge, where the forces of the world meet and clash." Qin Yun nodded, feeling the weight of the place settle on his shoulders. He could feel the power radiating from the crystal formation. It was a raw, untamed force, ancient and primal. "This is where the source of the disturbances lies?" Yan Rui asked, her voice sharp as she scanned the area. Mei Lin nodded gravely. "Yes. The crystal is the focal point of the ley line imbalance. It is what draws the power from the depths of the world and distorts it. If left unchecked, it will tear apart the fabric of reality itself." Thalos stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the group. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the crystal. "And what do we do now?" "We must cleanse it," Mei Lin said, her tone resolute. "The crystal must be purified, or the entire realm will fall. We cannot afford to let it continue feeding on the ley lines." Qin Yun stepped forward, his expression calm but his mind racing. The gravity of the situation was clear. The crystal was not just a symbol of the ley line imbalance. It was the heart of the storm, the epicenter of the world's chaos. If they failed to stop it here, there would be no second chance. But as he took a step toward the crystal, a powerful force slammed into him, sending a shockwave through the air. The ground beneath them quaked, and the sky above seemed to crack, as if something was breaking free. From the depths of the plane, a massive figure emerged, a towering entity cloaked in swirling shadows. Its form was indistinct, shifting like smoke, but its presence was overwhelming, suffocating. It stood over 20 feet tall, its body an amalgamation of darkness and energy, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "This is not a natural creature," Yanrui said, her voice laced with concern. "It's a manifestation of the ley line disturbances." The entity loomed above them, its gaze fixed on Qin Yun. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed in their minds. "You dare disturb my slumber?" it asked. "Foolish mortals, you are no more than ants to me." Qin Yun's heart raced, but his composure never wavered. He stepped forward, his eyes locked with the creature's glowing orbs. "I do not fear you." The entity's laughter was low and mocking. "You should. You cannot fathom the power you face. I am the embodiment of the storm, the manifestation of the chaos that has been building for millennia. The world is mine to claim." "Not if I have any say in the matter," Qin Yun retorted, his voice calm yet filled with authority. Mei Lin stepped forward, raising her hands to form an intricate series of ice sigils. "This is no mere beast. It is an ancient spirit, bound by the ley lines. If we are to defeat it, we must sever the connection to the ley lines." The entity snarled, its form shifting violently. "You think you can sever the connection? The ley lines are mine to command. I will tear your world apart before you even have the chance." With a deafening roar, the entity lunged at them. Its massive hands reached out like great black claws, intending to crush them all. Thalos reacted instantly, drawing his blade and charging at the creature. His sword cleaved through the air with the force of a storm, but the entity seemed to melt into the shadows, avoiding his strike with unnatural speed. "Watch out!" Yanrui shouted, pushing Qin Yun back just as the entity's claws swiped through the air where he had been standing moments before. The battle that followed was unlike any Qin Yun had ever faced. The creature was fast, powerful, and its control over the ley lines granted it powers beyond comprehension. It shifted in and out of existence, striking from impossible angles. Every attack it made warped the very fabric of reality, twisting space and time. Qin Yun, however, was undeterred. His sword glowed with a brilliant light as he moved to engage the entity. Each swing of his blade was precise, cutting through the distortion in the air, but the entity's shifting nature made it hard to land a decisive blow. "Focus on the ley line disturbance," Mei Lin called out. "We must sever its connection to the ley lines." With a single motion, Qin Yun called upon the power of his sovereign's authority, channeling the full force of his will into the very earth beneath him. The ground trembled, and the crystal at the heart of the storm pulsed violently. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze, and the creature faltered. Seizing the opportunity, Yanrui and Thalos launched their coordinated attacks, striking at the creature's vulnerable points. The entity howled in rage, its form destabilizing as the ley line connection began to weaken. But as it faltered, the creature's true power surged. A massive shockwave erupted from its body, knocking everyone back and sending them tumbling to the ground. The ley line disturbances intensified, threatening to tear apart the fabric of reality itself. "We need more time," Mei Lin said urgently, her eyes wide with alarm. "We can't hold it off much longer." Qin Yun gritted his teeth, his hands trembling as the power within him surged. He called upon every ounce of his strength, every thread of his will, and channeled it into the crystal at the center of the storm. The earth groaned, the ley lines crackled with energy, and the air itself seemed to warp. And then, in an explosion of blinding light, the ley line connection was severed. The entity let out a final, anguished cry as its form disintegrated into nothingness. The ground shook one last time, but then, as quickly as it had come, the storm dissipated, leaving only the stillness of the fractured north. Breathing heavily, Qin Yun lowered his sword, his eyes scanning the now quiet landscape. The battle had been won, but the cost was high. The storm had been quelled, but it had left its mark. "This is not the end," Qin Yun murmured. "There will be more." And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the ancient eye that had awakened watched in silence, waiting. Chapter 10. The Shattered Veil. The battle had been fierce, but the world held its breath as the echoes of the storm, as passing, reverberated through the fractured north. The winds had ceased their howling, the crackling energy subsiding into an eerie silence. For a moment, it seemed as though everything had returned to a fragile stillness. Yet, even in that silence, Qin Yun could feel the underlying tension that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of reality. The creature, the ancient entity born from the ley line disturbances, had been slain, but its defeat had only served to peel back a single layer of the mystery that now plagued the world. The ley lines had been fractured, yes, but the forces behind the disturbance had not been vanquished. In truth, it felt as though they had only scratched the surface of something far darker. Qin Yun stood at the center of the fractured north, his eyes fixed on the now quiet plain where the battle had raged. His hand, still grasping the hilt of his sword, trembled with the remnants of power that had surged through him in the moments before the entity as demise. His breath came slow and measured, but his mind raced, trying to piece together what had truly transpired. Beside him, Yan Rui, her expression as unreadable as ever, stepped forward. The chilling winds of the fractured north seemed to swirl around her, yet she remained unmoved by the cold. Her eyes scanned the horizon, and Qin Yun could tell that she too was troubled by the events that had just unfolded. "That creature," she began, her voice breaking the silence. It was no mere servant of the ley lines, it was something more. Qin Yun nodded, his gaze never leaving the place where the entity had fallen. "I know. It wasn't just a manifestation of the disturbances. It was a guardian, or perhaps a remnant of something far older. You think it was connected to the sovereigns?" Yan Rui asked, her tone sharp. "I don't think it was a mere servant of the sovereigns," Qin Yun replied, his voice thoughtful. "I think it was their creation, or at least part of it. The sovereigns had power over the ley lines, and they twisted the very fabric of reality to serve their own ends. But in doing so, they created something beyond their control. This entity, this storm, it was just a piece of the puzzle." Yan Rui's expression hardened, and she turned to face him fully. "What are you suggesting, Qin Yun? That this is just the beginning? That there are more of these things waiting to rise from the depths?" Qin Yun met her gaze, his eyes filled with determination. "Yes. This was not the final battle. There are forces at play here that we have yet to understand. This entity was only a manifestation of something much larger, a force that the sovereigns had unleashed long ago." Mei Lin approached them, her expression grave. Her ice-blue eyes were wide with concern. "The ley lines are still unstable," she said softly. "Even with the entity's defeat, the damage has been done. We've only delayed the inevitable." "The question is," Qin Yun said, turning to face her, "what happens next?" Mei Lin hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she grasped the hilt of her sword. "We don't know. But there are whispers among the clans. Whispers of an ancient power that lies dormant beneath the world. Some believe it was locked away by the sovereigns in the deepest parts of the ley lines. If the ley lines continue to fracture, that power will awaken, and when it does, it will bring destruction," Yan Rui finished for her, her voice dark. "The balance will shatter, and nothing will remain." Qin Yun felt the weight of their words, but he refused to be consumed by fear. The future was uncertain. Yes, but as long as he stood, as long as they all stood, he would fight to protect this world. "We must find the source of the ley line disturbances," Qin Yun declared, his voice strong. "We must stop the fractures from spreading further." "But how?" Mei Lin asked, her brow furrowing. "We barely survived this battle, and yet there are no clear answers. How can we stop something we don't understand?" Qin Yun took a deep breath. "We begin by understanding. We find the heart of the disturbance, and we trace it back to its source. "We can't do this alone," Yanrui said, her eyes narrowed. "We need more than just strength. We need knowledge. We need allies." Qin Yun looked at her, and for a moment there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He knew she was right. Their path ahead was fraught with peril, and it would take more than just brute force to overcome the trials that awaited them. "Then we find those who can help us," he said, his voice resolute. "The sovereigns may be gone, but their legacy lives on in the ruins of the ninefold realms. There are those who still hold the secrets of the past. We will seek them out." As the winds of the fractured north began to pick up again, Mei Lin, Yanrui, and Qin Yun stood together, gazing toward the horizon. The journey ahead would be treacherous, filled with unknown dangers and challenges. But they had no choice but to press on. The age of restoration was still in its infancy, but the true test was just beginning. The next morning, they gathered their things, preparing for the journey that lay ahead. Their destination was clear: the hidden libraries of the Oracle Guild, a place long thought to be lost to time. If there were answers to be found, they would be there. But as they prepared to leave, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. The battle with the ancient entity had been only the first trial. There would be more. The forces that had been set in motion were far greater than any of them could have imagined. And somewhere, deep within the heart of the ley lines, the first stirrings of the ancient power began to wake. Epilogue. Embers in the wind. The war drums had long since fallen silent. In the aftermath of the Accord's trial and the Gate's awakening, the ninefold realms entered an uneasy peace. Yet peace, as history teaches, is rarely still. Qin Yun stood atop the sky-glass spire, the winds of Sanctum Astra whispering through his robes. His gaze stretched to the far horizons where clouds kissed mountains and storms brewed quietly. Behind him, Yanrui approached, her presence as steady as the pulse of the world. "It sleeps now," she said, her voice almost lost in the wind. "For now," Qin Yun replied, "but not forever." The entity from the gate, neither ally nor enemy, had passed judgment not with words, but with silence. It wandered now through the lay threads of the world, learning, listening. Beneath its passage, some cities bloomed with new vitality. Others crumbled under the weight of memories unearthed. The Council of Nine disbanded not in chaos, but quiet resignation. Each leader returned to their realm, burdened with visions of possible futures. Qin Yun began recording those visions. He wrote not as a sovereign, but as a witness, one who had seen a world fractured and dared to imagine it whole. In the wind's lullaby, embers danced, and from them the next flame would rise,